with the consumer as the other party that stakeholder within the banking sector. Why don't I have access to credit? Why don't I have, me as a consumer, why don't I have a credit card, for example, right? And I would say again, I have a job, I have formal education, and a job maybe a little bit beyond entry level, but sometimes I run out of my salary, right? But I don't have access. Even if I don't, I feel like my credit reputation, I've never bothered to calculate what that is, but I don't think it's bad, right? Why doesn't a person like me have access to, say, credit card? Why don't I get tap on
Why
credit?
do you want to have a credit card? Because having a credit card is good, but it starts with you. Why is your credit history bad?
No, mine isn't. I'm saying
No.
Okay.
I know. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
Because you see, at the end of the day, you need to be very, finance is quite an interesting thing. I don't know if you've read The Richest Man in Babylon.
I don't.
Please do. It's a very interesting book by George Clason. And in that book, he talks about the past, fattening your past, fattening your wallet. And many guys come to him and say, but we can't be like Aga. Aga has made so much money. I mean, we can't be like him. We have we're doing hard labors, small work. We cannot save as much as him. But it's a very interesting principle when you think about money. If you saved, let's say you're earning 100,000 and you save 10,000 every month religiously.
Yeah.
You will have more money than a guy who's earning 20 million and is saving nothing. And again, when you now get your savings, what do you use your savings for? Do you spend them on liabilities, or do you actually invest them in other businesses that can bring you money? And also, when you're investing in those other businesses that bring you money, do you understand the businesses? Because if you invest in something that you don't understand, you're surely going to burn your money. But most important of all is, you see, it's very important, especially for us young people, to be financially independent. What is it that you are doing beyond your job? Why should you run out of money, say, before the end of the month?
Again.
People who have it will have it back. And the ones who don't have it will have... It's about how you spend your money, how you deal with money, how you think about money.
I agree.
You see, when you if I think about money, personally, for me, money is just this a paper that facilitates a service, a process, and so on and so forth. So how I think about it and how I protect it and how I value it is completely different from a person who sees money as a thing to flaunt around or brag about or spend recklessly. And again, back to the point of being reckless, because you see, if you think of money as a facilitator for just enjoyments and you don't plan, you don't save, you don't think about the future, you're doomed.
Yeah, so I want to first emphasize this a little bit. I'm going to give you my example. Right?
Yeah.
We are recording this podcast, yeah? And it would make for better video if we had extra $5,000 to buy a second camera, right? But the only way we are going to get that 5,000 is we are going to wait for maybe 3 months' salary, collect the savings of that salary, and have enough money to what? To save that, yeah. But if we all had credit cards, right, we would be able to get this immediately, yeah. So that is the question. I'm wondering, if
Okay. Again, I'll. It will just come down to one thing. A lot of the time, for you to start any business, you don't have to start big. Now, you see, you want 2 cameras, you want so many cameras. I don't know if you've seen my show, SME Connect. We began recording using a phone. Yeah. And now we have cameras and everything, and it's on Urban, and, potentially we're going to get sponsors to take care of so many things. You just have to know, or you just have to like what you're doing. That's the first point.
I agree.
If you're starting, see, at the end of the day, it's the passion. I can give you the whole equipment and everything, and trust me, if you're doing a crap thing that you do not believe in, it's useless. So I think for me, the access to money and all of that, trust me,
it's not.
If you're doing something, again, it's about value. Yeah. So the amount of value that you put into your product, into yourself, into your activity that you're trying to put out there, that value attracts money.
Yeah. Okay.
You get that?
Yeah.
But if you begin with money as a problem, or you start complaining about resources, then there's a problem. Think about any of these businesses. If Steve Jobs would have loved to start with a massive factory,
yeah,
he would have loved to get all the credit that he can to start with a massive factory, but he began in a garage. Look at Apple today.
Yeah. So you can't start Apple
Yeah.
in Uganda. Even if people need iPhones,
Yes.
in a world where there are no iPhones, you don't start an iPhone company in Uganda because the consumers you're targeting don't have that capacity.
Then what
to
do you
spend.
do in Uganda that the consumers can have the capacity to spend?
No, you can do a Yuga roll. I see some guys who make fancy Rolexes.
And how about matchboxes?
Right? Maybe you can do matchboxes.
And how
You
about
can do that,
yeah.
but for the times now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you are looking at, because the world is more open, it's a little bit
Absolutely.
more open than it was 10 years back, right? Right now, if I see a kid building an app, TikTok, and they're making billions within 3-4 years, and I see for sure this is something I could have built in Uganda, this is something Ugandans could have enjoyed, but the infrastructure is a limitation, my wonder is, why is it that banks especially, they're not looking at this as an opportunity to...
Again, but again, that's where you go wrong. The whole idea that financing can only come from banks.
Okay.
It doesn't only come from banks. I mentioned equity, venture capital funds, angel
First,
investors. and all of this.
differentiate those for me, because...
So bank funding is the traditional one. You walk into a bank and you say,
Get a loan.
this is my thing. I want money, and they give you money or they don't. Equity is where you come to me and say, Otoa, I have this idea, but it's my company. We have started small and whatever. I'm willing to give you 40% of the stake, and you give me this money because this is where I know I'm going. This is where I can see myself going. And Otoa, I'll look at your business, I'll evaluate, and I'll say, I think this thing makes sense. Okay, here's the money. Give me my 40%, and I'm part of your business. So I can either contribute finance, I can contribute my intellect and all of that, my networks and all of that. Venture capital funds, you have guys who just venture capital funds really come to businesses that or ideas. These are guys who are willing to risk, because the risk in venture capital that venture capital facilitates is far higher than a bank or equity. So it's a guy who just comes up with a random small idea and says, "Boss, this is." So me as a venture capitalist or an angel investor, I'm just like, you know what? I close my eyes, put in money, and then support the business to become bigger, greater, and whatever, and we all make money. The problem with that sometimes, though, is because the young innovators are so desperate for the money, they will go with any investor, and then the investor at the end of the day takes up the whole thing. So again, you need to be very careful. So I think for me, it's really about adding value to your product or to your thing that you're trying to sell, and then when you walk up to anyone and say, this is who we are, this is where we see ourselves growing or going or growing. What we need to get there is this. That money easily comes, you see. But you have to be able to articulate yourself. You have to be able to create a scenario, a canvas that speaks to that growth. I want to make money, but I don't want to risk my money. So when you come to me, I need it to be a bulletproof plan that speaks to my money will come back. I won't just throw money into these young guys who are just adventurous and want to play around with my, with my resources. So I think that's what I can say about that, really.
A company that I worked for in San Francisco, what they did was give you money, and why I think this is important, right? So you get your paycheck through them, something similar to what banks do.
Absolutely.
But what they do is they can give you, before the paycheck comes, they can give you a significant amount of money depending on how much you usually earn, right? So they were big. They had raised, I think by the time I left, they had raised 25 million, right? And again, because it's important for the banks, and they had raised from, I forget the name of the bank. It's a big bank in New York, right? It's important for the banks that the consumers are they have the capacity to spend, because that's how you sort the capitalism wheel runs, right? And I know right now there's a new startup. It's sort of the new financial unicorn called X1, and it's redefining how it's calculating your credit score, right? So it's not about how well you've paid back before, but how much you earn and what is your capacity to be promoted at your work, right? So
Does it use AI?
Yeah, they're using a lot of data. Yeah, they're using a lot of data as well. But it's I read about it recently. So it's one of the unicorns now. People are saying it has a lot of potential, right? But the thing that worries me is, in the West, people have realized that we can be a big economy. America can be a big economy when most of the money is in debt, right? And people can still live comfortably. Yeah. But here we still have that phobia around if I'm indebted, it sort of feels like I'm incomplete. Yeah. Things like that. Why isn't it that we have that? Why isn't it that people are enforcing a lot of people to spend, even if they're spending money that they don't have?
I think our
immediately?
biggest challenge is, especially for a lot of young people, our generation, is we're trying to live the American lifestyle, the American dream. You've talked about credit cards and all of these things. And what we need to understand is that these are supposed to facilitate us in our daily lives, and they're quite important, I must say. But I think ultimately what we need to be thinking about is creating wealth for ourselves beyond just borrowing, but wealth for ourselves. And that comes back to the idea of what businesses are you involved in besides your main job? What other gigs are you involved in that are also bringing in money, alternative sources of income? Because you see, when you have all of these alternative sources of income, the idea or the need for money is actually suppressed because money is actually coming to you. When you think about business, it's great to diversify. It's quite, in fact, important to diversify your business. I remember asking Bitature why, how he was going through this whole COVID phase. Protea, the two Proteas were actually closed down.
Yeah.
And the guy said, well, they're closed down. I have so many overhead costs, which in my opinion were going to be a bother. So I decided to shut down. However, I have other businesses that are making money, that are bringing in money. So the whole idea of diversifying creates that, you're not desperately in need to get into unnecessary debt. Debt has to be worthwhile. It has to be for something.
Yeah.
This whole culture of going to the bank to borrow money. I'll tell you a simple story. A guy went to the bank, one of the banks, to borrow money. And when he got the money was meant to build a school. When they went to see the school after some months, there was no school. It was actually a liquor factory. And when they asked him what had happened, the guy said, but you guy, the rate of return on this liquor factory is more than educating children. But and again, he had bought himself a new car and all of these things. It's misplaced priorities, and because now you're deviating from your purpose, your goal, the initial focus, you find yourself really getting into a lot of mess. And I think that's an unfortunate thing.
Oh yeah, no, so I think that's a good example, though. But right now, even now, there's no like formal sort of credit card thing going. But for example, within my circles, right, I have a few friends who owe me money, right? So they borrow from me and I lend them because I know they're good for it, right? So he comes and says, you know what, my kid needs to go to the hospital and, COVID, salo, what, give me, say, 100,000. And if I have it, I give him, right?
But is that from your personal... is that from your business money?
No. Like my personal money, my personal savings, and these are my friends. Yeah, people that I just drink with, for example, right? And I also have the same, right? So I go to say my museum, I'm like, today things are bad. You lend me 200,000 because I have a deal, right? But I'm still thinking, and so I'm taking the risk for my friends. Yeah. My museum is taking my risk, for example, right? But I'm thinking in a structure where the banks have given us, and I'm emphasizing this a little bit, but we're going to move on from it. But if the banks are giving me a credit card, for example, right, because of how much I earn, instead of being a burden to my museum, because the more you borrow from your museum, the more you start calculating also how much you earn, and that then is worrying that maybe I wasted my money educating this kid, things like that. But instead of doing that, instead of trying to borrow informally, because borrowing is inevitable,
absolutely,
why isn't there a structure where I go to the bank like the West does, and the West has been very good at this, where I go to the bank, apply for credit card, give my bank statement and show how much I've been earning and all the data that is needed. And then when I need that card 200K, I just go swipe my card.
I think, to be honest with you, we have that already.
Okay.
We actually have that. I wouldn't want to speak about my bank because I'm not here for that today, but I must say we have that in Uganda. We have credit cards that are issued and using the same way, proof of your income, your credit checks are done as well, and you're given a credit card. That's done. That's available.